what I want. I'm free to sing my song, though it gets out of time. I'm free to sing my song, though it gets out of time. So love me, hold me, love me, hold me. I'm free. I saw her today at the reception. A glass of wine in her hand. I knew she was gonna meet her connection. At her feet was her footloose man. And you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, you might find you get what you need. We went down to the demonstration to get our fair share of abuse. Singing, we're gonna vent our frustration. If we don't, we'll blow a 15 fuse. And you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, you might find you get what you need.
that's constantly moving and changing, we find ourselves on the brink of a monumental shift. A shift from the old to the new, from what was to what can be. And that shift is now. Imagine a world where clean energy can be produced, consumed, and shared right where you are, from the heart of bustling cities to the tranquility of rural landscapes. Imagine a world fueled by sustainable, green, and affordable energy that everyone can be a part of. Imagine no longer. The solution is here. Decentralized energy is ready to illuminate our world, making every home, every business, every community a light of hope and innovation. This is our moment. The power is in the hands of each and every one of us. Every watt of decentralized energy, every effort to reduce carbon footprint, and every step towards energy efficiency contributes to a broader global transformation. Let's not wait any longer. Let's build it. Embrace the change. Drive the transition. Are you ready to be the next?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Be Next, Europe's Decentralized Energy Innovation Forum. Promoted by the Greenvolt Group, this is a unique event at a European level dedicated to exploring the role of decentralized energy in this new dynamic landscape of renewables that we're living in. My name is Dave Keating. I'm a journalist based in Brussels covering energy issues. I'm the senior reporter for the website Energy Monitor, also the Brussels correspondent for the television network France 24. I'll be guiding us through today's conversations, where we'll be exploring all of the different aspects of decentralized energy, from how to plan it, how to finance it, and how to really get it going. Now, we know that in the current geopolitical context, ensuring secure, sustainable, and affordable energy supplies to the EU, to its citizens, to its countries, to its businesses, it's become increasingly crucial, as underscored by the recent reform of the EU's energy market design. So this evolving scenario places decentralized energy in a pivotal role in order to safeguard the interests of countries and consumers, and at the same time, it also increases the responsibility of the stakeholders, including renewable energy developers like the Greenvolt Group, who are compelled to provide innovative solutions to accelerate this transition. So throughout today, we're going to be hosting essential conversations where distinguished business leaders, political leaders, and stakeholders can collaborate, share ideas, and contribute to driving actionable change. Now, this event is being live streamed. Greetings from Lisbon to those of you watching us around the world. We're also looking forward to having your virtual presence here with us today. Now, to get us started, I would like to call onto the stage for the opening session, João Mensonet, who is the CEO of the Greenvolt Group.
Good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. And I'm not going to take too much time. There are many interesting people it's important that you hear about their views. I just wanted to tell you a few things. First point, energy transition is a must. Of course it is. Renewables are obviously part of this energy transition, and why are they? Because they are environmentally friendly, because they are contribute to the independence of energy, and finally because they are cheapest. If this is true, why don't you have more renewables? The question here is that the big projects today, although they have all this advantage, the big projects have also problems. Two kinds of problems, trying to be simplistic. From one side, there are problems with the grid. The grid cannot absorb everything. On the other hand, the big projects, and you have to face it, are intrusive. Against, just think about agriculture, just think about impacts in terms of biodiversity, noise, health, many things. So, it's a fact. We cannot avoid that. The big projects have opposition, and that opposition would not disappear. That creates a strong, very strong opportunity for decentralized generation, which European Commission just stated last year that could represent and will represent more than 25% of the electricity consumption in Europe during this decade. But again, the same question. If decentralized generation has all the advantage of the traditional utility scale generation, and if it's not intrusive, and if it's not has less problems in terms of the grid, why don't you have more? Why are we just beginning? And that's why, and this is perhaps one of the big subjects of this event, is that to discuss why, being the fundamentals so strong, are we still in the beginning? Without trying to anticipate conclusions, I would say, as some food for thought, that the reasons why we are just beginning are, I would say, a three kind of reasons. Firstly, regulatory or legislative problems still existing. Some countries don't have the proper laws, yet they did not transpose yes directives. Others did transpose and were innovative, but they are problems in the application. So I would say, and finally, there are sometimes bureaucracy which complicates. But I would say that those reasons in terms of legislation and regulation are important. In particular, I would call the attention to the lack of incentives that the grid operator, namely the distributor, have to develop that. This is a question of incentives. If somebody does not have an incentive, it would not work as well as if it had an incentive. So, first block of reasons is that there are things to be done at the legislative or regulatory level. But it's not the only one. A second one is that the decision makers, and when I speak about decision makers, I'm not only speaking about governments, but I'm speaking about all decision makers, including the corporate CEOs and the corporate shareholders, don't take the decisions of something which is obvious. As I told, decentralized generation can potentially be, or normally is, not only friendly from a point of view environmental, less intrusive, but also economic. So why are not the decisions taken in time? It's again something that you have to think, all of us. Why, as CEOs of a company, don't do it? This has to do with things as simple as this, is that sometimes when somebody has to to choose in each moment between what is urgent and what is important, people tend to decide only on what is urgent. It's a question of mentality. And of course, also lack of decisions taken by the states. Very often the states are fine in terms of legislation, but they are not so fine in terms of using all the wealth, all the real estate they have. And you think about the states are the owners of schools, the owners of markets. And so what we see there, very few. So first block, regulation, legislation. Second block, mentality, willing to decide. And third block, which has to do with our action, our meaning, companies who develop this market. We cannot be lazy, that's my point. We cannot just think, we have a good product, we install panels, it's done. It's not done. We must be much more imaginative. One of the things, and we cannot just think, we see a roof, let's install the panels for self-consumption. Important, yes. Enough, no. So we have to be innovative. The first innovation is long-term PPAs, which avoid investments upfront. Second one, very important, and this case where we are today is a very important case. It's sharing the power between those who have a rooftop, okay, in this case, football stadium nearby, and this hospital, which uses the electricity generated by the solar panels, but you cannot stay there only. We have to think more and more that energy must be also, panels should be part of a global solution. So my point here is that we cannot just use, we as the companies which act here cannot be just sleeping based on the simple things. They must be able to innovate, to give a more deeper analysis. Sharing, PPAs, combining, utilizing and promoting electrical vehicles, charging, all this must be there. So, what I want to say is that the case is fantastic, the DG, but we cannot just be very happy looking at a few cases. We must be very ambitious and proactive. This event wants really to discuss all these issues, so we are going to approach basically 4 subjects. First point, regulation and market trends, very important. Second point, the financing. Although, and I would like to say the following, this sector does not need subsidies, does not need, but financing, of course, it needs. And so, and the liquidity is very important, but no subsidies by financing. That's why we will have at the second block the financing and the issues which are caused by them. We are on a good track, but again, not enough. On the good track, very nice, but just a step. Third point, we'll be able to discuss more specifically certain market trends and certain achievements, which were ideas. Fourth point, very important, we'll see examples, real examples that we have chosen between our clients that have proven that we don't have to wait for technological advance. It's here. What we have today, it's enough to begin strongly. If it comes, others come, perfect, will be even stronger. But so we'll see these 4 subjects, and we'll have the privilege in the end to have the presence of the chairwoman of this finest hospital in Portugal, Mrs. Leonor Beleza, and finally from the mayor of Lisbon, which will also address us some important issues. So, I wish to you that we enjoy this session, and for me it's enough. Now, let's continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, João Manso Neto. It's a really key point you made there, that the energy transition, there are really, really important driving factors for it, right? We know that it's important, and yet things aren't really processing at the speed that matches this challenge, right? We know things are moving fast in renewables, but are they moving fast enough to match the challenge that we have? So I spoke in the beginning about some of those regulatory changes at EU level, and that's what we're going to hear about next in our keynote speech. We're going to hear about the new electricity market design in Europe, with a keynote address from the Deputy Director General of the European Commission's Energy Department, Mathilde Vorsdorfer, who, due to a scheduling conflict, will deliver her intervention remotely. So let's see if we have her connected now. Hello, good morning, Mathilde. Thank you so much for joining us here virtually from Brussels. Looks like it's a cloudy day there behind you, but I hear that we're starting to get sun over in Brussels, which is also my home, so lovely to see you there. So tell us a little bit about what these changes are and how they might impact decentralized energy.
So good morning from Brussels. Thank you very much for inviting me. I would have really liked to be in Lisbon and not in cloudy Brussels, but that's the way it is. I'm happy to join you online, and I already inspired by the speech of the CEO, João Manso Neto, who already very well described the different challenges of that clean energy transition. We are looking ahead and we are working together. There is obviously after the energy crisis 2022, 2023, and we are still monitoring, but I think we can already say that jointly the EU, with all the stakeholders and governments, have managed to go out through that crisis, and we are in a more stable environment. And we have also managed last year a lot of the regulatory framework the CEO was mentioning. So we have a climate law. The EU is the first continent to become climate neutral by 2050, and we have set the framework for 2030. We want to reduce 55% of our greenhouse gas emission. We want, and the emphasis is very much on renewables and energy efficiency, and we need the right market design. Globally, we work with our partners. At the COP28, for example, last year, we agreed with 130 other countries that we need to triple our renewable investment by 2030 and double our energy efficiency framework, energy efficiency measures. So we are monitoring that. So I think we have in the EU a framework which we also work with partners outside the EU. So I will concentrate on three key aspects of that framework where we need to go ahead in order to make it happen. First, renewables. Second, the market design, and then maybe a few words on buildings. First, on renewables. I think everyone agrees that the renewables are now competitive. We need them for our climate change ambition, but also to become less dependent on imports. Renewables are domestic, but they're also there to promote growth and jobs. And we have set our target at EU level to 42.5% renewables by 2030. That means more or less a doubling from what we have now. There's even an inspiration to go to 45%. So there is the direction of travel for all our EU member states that renewables are not the only source, but they are the priority to fulfill all our targets of affordability, sustainability, and becoming more secure. And when we speak about renewables, we need all forms of renewables to increase. Centralized one, but also decentralized one. Large scale and rooftops, wind and solar, hydropower, and so forth. It would also require the shift to renewables in the energy demand coming from all sectors. So transport is an area where we need to focus on more, buildings, and I will come back to that. The role of decentralized energy resources, which are typically the smaller ones connected to distribution grids and associated to self-consumption, are becoming more prominent. I take the example of solar photovoltaic installation, which have become the key enabler of decentralized generation. And in the EU, not only in Spain, but overall, solar PV installation are rapidly accelerating. We had a new record year in 2022 with 41 gigawatt and in 2023 with 56 gigawatt. That's a 40% increase and a doubling of installation over just 2 years. And a lot, when we speak about PV, we think about the large-scale solar PV parks. But we have to know that 2/3 of our PV installations in Europe consistently are taking place on roofs. So it's the small, the local distribution grid. We have in our current framework on renewables also the basis for growth of self-consumption by giving electricity consumer the right to become self-consumer. And I agree to what the CEO said. It's not only that you have the right, we have to make it happen. And we see more and more examples in a number of EU member states to make it happen. One area where we have put a lot of emphasis as well is to simplify, therefore, the permitting procedures. We have made one of our proposals last year and was to accelerate, give renewables the overriding public interest status, acceleration areas, and also one-stop shops. We also agreed that small solar PV installation do not require a positive permitting reply after 1 month. That is a concrete example to go faster in that. But for the expansion of generation capacity, we need the grids. We have seen that a number of our renewables projects were curtailed in parts of Europe because of the lack of grids, both transmission system grids and also distribution grids. So we must make sure that the system operators rapidly expand, modernize, and also digitalize their networks. Therefore, we came up last year with a grids action plan, which is very much the focus of debate now of CEOs, of stakeholders, of consumers. So we need that debate. And we have in our grid action plan very concrete measures to contribute to expand and modernize the transition, but very much also the distribution networks by unlocking the required investments. And we know the investments, the private investments, are huge to build those grids. And we can only contribute from the EU side when it comes to the big interconnectors, which is also important for Spain and Portugal. If we go, for example, with the interconnector to France. These are examples where the EU comes in with project of common interest to help the interconnection of the Iberian Peninsula with the rest of Europe. But we also have, obviously, a lot of emphasis in the grid action plan, as I mentioned, to the distribution networks, which needs to be developed. We need more flexibility to integrate the more variable renewables in the future. And that's why the focus very much is not only now to implement, but also to have an energy system integration approach and an innovation approach. And we also look beyond the traditional sectors at other end-use sectors, for example, to look at electric mobility when we look at future sectors to expand. So the renewables are one of our key priorities. And in order to enable them, we need the grids, and we need, and that's my second point, and you asked on that and mentioned it, the electricity market design. When we came out of the crisis and the unprecedented high prices we saw for gas and then electricity, there was a lot of criticism of our electricity market design. We proposed to reform. And I think the reform we can already see, even though it needs to go the final steps of formal adoption, we can already see some good positive outcome. First of all, this market design is mainly there to boost competitiveness and look at the energy prices, the electricity prices, which have, compared to the peak we saw in August 2022, have at least stabilized. They are still higher compared to our main competitor like US or China. They have stabilized and they are in the range of what it is, for example, in Japan and UK, and we still have to work on them, certainly to boost our competitiveness. Secondly, the aim of the electricity market design was also to secure energy sovereignty, so our security of supply, and of course, decarbonization. In order to help, as I said, the transformation of the clean energy transition, we need a huge amount of investments in renewables, in grids, in all what is needed. And the EMD, the electricity market design reform, wants to give that predictability. And I think the CEO already mentioned the instruments which we need to promote further. The instrument are power purchase agreements, so that an electricity provider goes in a commercial contract with those industry, often energy intensive industry, but more and more also IT companies, to make that agreement of 10, 15 years of power purchase. We need more contracts of difference to have a longer term perspective, and also to have a bit less volatility, even though I think volatility is there as part of the markets. We need to stabilize, and one idea is also to promote further the contract of difference. But we also have in our electricity market design the possibility for consumers to share energy. So energy sharing agreements is also something we want to enhance further to incentivize private investments and also protect private consumers. Because at the heart of the electricity market design, apart from stabilizing and look at the forward market and have longer market with power purchase agreement and contract of difference, is also to protect the consumers. As we saw in the crisis, consumers are households, SMEs, but also industry. And we have to protect in particular the consumers, the households, which have suffered from that very high prices. Protection of consumer is one thing, but also empowerment of consumer. I spoke about decentralized energy, and that is very much what this conference is focusing on, is also empower of consumer, which have more choices of contracts, more direct access, as I mentioned, to renewable energy, and also improve their standing in relation to supplier. So greater consumer empowerment will be achieved by allowing consumers to profit from a wide variety of supply contract at the same time, allowing them, for example, to benefit from off-peak electricity prices for their heat pumps. That is just one example. And we would like to encourage them to participate in energy sharing. For example, if they do not own their own roof, that they can, with their neighbors, it doesn't mean even physical neighbors, but with somebody else in the vicinity to share energy. So the consumer will be able more and more, and that, I think, enables the framework, but also, as I said in the beginning, we had a consumer forum last year in Dublin, where I already saw a concrete example. We invited we invited companies, innovative companies, who have promoted those via digital solutions, which is often something we can experience, but also many other tools. So this electricity market design was a cornerstone, is a cornerstone of our policy. We luckily agreed with the member states and the European Parliament last year, December. The last formal steps are being done, and then it's about implementation. Again, this is something we do together with stakeholders, together with industry, together with all those who have contributed to make it happen, and that will absolutely continue. My last and third point is another area where we need the consumer and the industry, and that are the buildings. We know that the EU building stock accounts for 42% of final energy consumption and 35% of energy-related greenhouse gas emission. And we also know that 80% of energy consumption in building stems from heating and cooling needs. And that's where another top priorities for me and for us in the Commission is improvements in energy efficiency in buildings, and which goes hand in hand in increased production and use of renewables, energy in buildings. I mentioned solar PV, solar thermal, and heat pumps. So when we speak about renewables and energy efficiency, I think the buildings are one key example where both of them go hand in hand. A renovation of a building, public or private, can be improved by energy efficiency improvements and in parallel by renewable installations. We have also seen a huge take-up of heat pumps in Europe in 2022, which rose by 39% compared to 2021. So we want to incentivize and make it happen again when we put forward the revision of our energy performance of building directive, which is the legal framework to make it happen, which hopefully will be voted positively this week by Council and Parliament. Then we will have also here the framework of making our our buildings more energy efficient, both the existing one, which is obviously a huge challenge, and here financing comes in, but also new ones. I think on the new ones, we already have very good standard in Europe, nearly zero emission buildings. So we see a lot of progress. So the challenge remains for the existing buildings to make them more energy efficient. Also have, for example, we have a solar mandate in our EPBD, which was very much discussed between Parliament and Council, but there is a good outcome that is an obligation for new buildings to be solar ready and solar installation to be deployed in new and existing buildings. all obviously with the needed flexibilities for member states to adapt. Not all 27 EU member states are at the same level, but the direction of travel is a common one. And that's why we need also the building side and the flexibility here. So let me conclude. Very much looking forward to the discussion you have today. The Commission has put together with member states and stakeholders the framework, the regulatory framework to give 2030 and beyond the direction of travel with a clear priority given to renewables, energy efficiency, and other low-carbon solutions. Solar energy, decentralized energy, heat pumps, EV charging are all those which need the uptake, what the CEO said, the consumers to make it happen. And we are there to facilitate that. Their financing is a key aspect of that, but we mainly need private investments and the industry. We have our Net Zero Industry Act, who looks at the manufacturing side of all the deployment we need and the EU side to produce those projects. We need companies like your company and others to make that happen, and we will continue that dialogue together with you and all the citizens in Europe. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mechthild. Just a quick follow-up question for you, because you mentioned all of this raft of legislation that's come through in this term because of President Ursula von der Leyen's Green Deal and the package, the Fit for 55 package, which implements those into laws and regulations. This has been a busy term for this parliament, and you mentioned we've still got some things to wrap up in the coming week and this rush before the EU election in June. How important is it going to be over the next months and years, the implementation stage of this for the national capitals, like Lisbon, where we are here? How much is the success of all this legislation going to rely on how these national governments implement what has just been passed in Brussels?
Thank you very much. I mean, the key and the focus of our work together with all the capitals, Portugal, Lisbon, and all other capitals, is to implement it, to deliver on what is now possible with this, I agree, huge amount of texts which we need to implement. So there is the formal implementation, which we will accompany, but there's also the dialogue. We will, with our experts, go to each and every capital to explain how we can best work together, and we will exchange best practice, because some member states like Portugal is very good in one area but can learn from others. So in the next couple of years, apart from the purely legal implementation, we will work with the member states, with the stakeholders on how best to implement, to make it happen. And as I said, there are already signs, be it in the renewables, decentralized, or be it in the market design reform, or in some of our member states on buildings, on energy efficiency, where we can learn from each other. So we will work very, very closely with the member states, with the capitals and all stakeholders to make it happen. But the key word is delivery and implementation, and only where it's needed, we will look at additional points, or if it's not working, we can always revise. But the key part is now really the implementation, and we will work with Lisbon and all other capitals.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, because the oftentimes when a law is made in Brussels, it's really the start of a journey, not the end of a journey, right? The important parts really come up now. So thank you so much again, Mechthild Vorsdorfer, for joining us virtually here this morning. We're now going to move on to the first discussion panel. So we've already heard this morning from João Menso Neto, who explained to us that decentralized generation is really going to be key to meeting these goals that we've set. And because of the situation we find ourselves in, because of the needs that we have as societies, as businesses, as governments, having a decentralized generation could be a really good solution, because it's easy to deploy, it provides more security because it's not coming from a single source, and it allows countries greater energy independence, providing environmental and financial advantages. And as we've just heard from Mechthild Vorsdorfer from the European Commission, addition, recent regulatory changes at EU level are going to have a big impact on the potential for decentralized energy. But at the same time, however, implementing these various pieces of legislation at national level is going to be a challenge, as Mathilde was just pointing out. It's really, the hard work begins now. And how they're implemented is going to have big implications for the power sector going forward. So national governments have a lot of homework to do, businesses have a lot of homework to do, and consumers themselves will be talking about this during the course of the day. A lot of these decentralized solutions are ground up. They're coming from individuals with solar installations on their roof. This is really a big job for everyone involved. So now we're going to hear a little bit more about that from our first panel, which is called Decentralized Energy, Change the Way We Produce, Consume, and Share Energy. Let's watch a short video to get us started.
Security, independence, sustainability, affordability. These are the pillars upon which we must build the present and future of energy globally. It's time to change. It's time to illuminate our homes, our communities, our businesses with the power of decentralized energy.
There, I'd like to invite our panelists to come here on the stage and take your seats. So as we've heard just from our two opening keynotes, we're going to now have a discussion panel where we'll talk about how decentralized energy can change the way that we produce, consume, and share energy. And we'll be talking about the possibilities and also the potential pitfalls moving forward. Of course, there's lots of potential here, but this can also be tricky. So we're going to talk about where things could go wrong, where things could go right, and how to make sure this is a success. Let me introduce you now to the panelists who are now joining us here on stage. We have with us Valberga Hemmetsberger, who is CEO of Solar Power Europe, which represents the PV value chain for Europe. We have João Mensoneto, who you just heard from before, is the CEO of the Greenvolt Group. We have Pedro Carvalho, who is a professor and coordinator of the energy scientific area for the Instituto Superior Técnico at the University of Lisbon. We have Adolfo Mesquita Nunes, who is a partner at the law firm Perez Lorca. And we have Geronimo Mayra da Cunha, who is General Director for the Directorate General of Energy and Geology. Valberga, I'd like to start with a question for you. So we heard some interesting statistics there from Valberga in terms of the growth of solar rooftop, 40% in 2 years. That's a lot. In this context we find ourselves in, of geopolitical instability in Europe and the Middle East, along with these regulatory developments that Valberga talked about, what are the market trends and challenges in Europe in relation to decentralized generation, and in particular, for you, for solar rooftop?
Thanks a lot for the question, and thanks very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. And indeed, Mechthild already mentioned that we had an enormous growth of solar more generally. The 40% you just mentioned, that was year on year over the last 3 years. So that was quite respectable, I would say. We had more than, and Mechthild mentioned the data that we have been publishing end of last year with 56 gigawatt that were installed last year. We are revising that upwards. Now that we get the latest data in, it will be more than 57 gigawatt after all. So a huge growth. And 2/3 of it, and Mechthild mentioned it as well, is indeed rooftop. For all the reasons that you have already been mentioning in your introductory speech, because it is very close to citizens. Citizens are taking part in the energy transition. Companies are taking part in the energy transition, and it is space in any way that is not used and should be used in order to get us where we need to be to a net zero world. Now, you have been mentioning also the geopolitical difficulties that we are facing at the moment, and it's true that this is one of the factors, not the only one, but one of the factors why we have been growing so much over the last 3 years. And especially in the last 2 years, we've seen citizens really running for solar. That is something which at the moment is slowing down a little bit. You have also heard Mechthild saying that the energy prices are stabilizing. People are not that worried anymore, but still people continue engaging. What we see going forward is continued growth, but what we see this year is not a growth of 40% anymore, but of rather 10, 15%. And this has to do with a couple of bottlenecks that we are facing. Mechthild mentioned it already, one of the biggest bottlenecks is grids. But before I'm going into all these details, maybe one thing I should also still mention is that, taking a little bit of a more helicopter view, we need to, in order to keep on growing that fast, we need to first make sure that we're concentrating on getting electrification right. Electrification of Europe's energy system is key. And we need to make sure that we are integrating all these sectors, not just electricity, but integrating it with transport, integrating it with buildings, with heating in particular. So this is something that in the next 5 years, the new European Commission, supported by the member states, need to absolutely focus on, really electrify Europe. It's the most efficient pathway to become competitive, and that's after all something that we need to strive for. So that is the one thing. And then when we are zooming in again on roofs and on the role of buildings and rooftop solar, I do think it is very important to not talk about isolated solar on roofs, but really talk about integrated, electrified buildings where everything is connected. And this is also for sure next step that we need to take. But now coming back to the biggest bottleneck that we see at the moment, which is grids. Ambition in some member states, not in Portugal, because the NECP of Portugal and the plans for 2030 are really looking at a very high solar growth, which is great. So I would mention that point in a different setting, but grids are a major bottleneck. And here I would like to come back to what we see as the main incentives or the main solutions where Greenvolt plays a very important role. So first, obviously, we need to build grids and build more grids, but then flexibility needs to play a major role because we cannot be very fast in building grids. We need to do it, but still, the low-hanging fruit is getting more flexibility into the grids, having storage playing a more important role. And here is where I come to Greenvolt and energy sharing. Greenvolt has been decisive in bringing together with the Portuguese government the topic of energy sharing to the European level and the importance of energy sharing. It is important because it is helping to stabilize the grids. It is important because not everyone has a roof. And there's these beautiful examples I'm always mentioning when I'm on a stage where Greenvolt, for example, this kindergarten that you have been developing, we've just been talking about also the football stadium, which is providing electricity for this building, for the hospital. So there's really great examples, which is getting people to buy into the energy transition, also making it possible for those who don't have a roof to have renewable electricity, solar electricity, but also helping the grid in order to integrate the renewable electricity. And maybe once on a sideline, I also want to mention that Sofia Pinto Barbosa is very decisive in the work that we are doing as a chair of the buildings and prosumer work stream that we have at Solar Power Europe, really pushing for having what Mechthild just said, energy sharing in European law in the market design directive. So these are the points I wanted to mention to start with. We have a huge solar growth ahead. So just to also give you that number, we do think that by 2027, Europe will have some 355 gigawatt only on roofs. Only on roofs, so that's a huge number. In total, we're aiming at 1 terawatt of solar by 2030, which is a little higher than the European goals, but there's really a bright future for solar. But we need to make sure that we're getting rid of the grid, we're getting rid of the bottlenecks, and that is in particular grids, and that comes with a lot of storage, with energy sharing, and with more generally a lot of flexibility in the grids.
Yeah, and you mentioned the project that involves this very building. We'll be hearing about that later today, actually. João, so we've just heard about the regulatory context from Metschild and also the market trend context that we've heard from Valberga. Given all of that, what do you consider to be the main challenges in implementing these solutions for a multi-country cooperation?
Thank you very much for working. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the question. Let's see. The major. I tried in the beginning to speak about the major obstacles which are of different origins, and again, I would like more not to repeat what I just said, to address one or two issues which I think can be interesting to speak about. One, and I think it's important that each of us assumes and takes its own responsibility. One of them is that the companies who want to promote DG cannot be lazy, and this is very important. And namely when today we see that the power prices are stabilizing and getting to very low levels in the sunny hours, we must be able to face a very basic argument that will come from a more sophisticated investor or tenant, which says, well, you are offering me something, solar, in the hours in which the prices are low. So what is my business case? And we must be able to answer those difficult questions. And the only way to answer to those difficult questions is that we must go beyond the basic case of installing rooftops to serve the power. We have to think about sharing is a case in which we can share, and the hours that we lower price can be used by third people. But it's not enough. Batteries clearly has to be in the business case. As I told you, we don't need subsidies to install rooftops. We don't. But perhaps for batteries, you still needed some subsidies, at least in the first phase. So again, we have to, together with the government, to see where the money must come. And if you have batteries, there will be a game changer in terms of the intraday. Batteries are not the solution for everything. Of course, they are not the solution for intra-annual or seasonal adjustments, but for intraday, they are really very strong. But again, we have to go further on this. We have to be able to install batteries together, the communities, promoting electrical vehicles. So let's see. We cannot, again, we have to provide a complete service. We spoke about, the Commissioner spoke about the need of the heat pumps. All this have to do with the energy of service. So this is the first point, that we cannot just blame regulation, which is important, but we have to think, what can we do better to be more proactive? A second point that I would like to speak about is grids. I don't challenge that grids must be developed, but we can, the easiest thing is to do many things and to repeat and fulfill the world with grids. Theoretically could work, but does not exist. So we have to think not only in expanding the grids where they are really necessary, but we have also to think about better using the grids. There are many parts of the grid which is not being optimized. It's not. If you think about, to give an example, an hydro plant which had 200 megawatts can have, according to the rules in many countries, have that capacity blocked when it's used 20% of the time or even less. So let's not do only the easiest things. That not require money over money. We, meaning the society and the policy makers, everybody, must think how to make it easier, the transition, which has to do a lot with better using the grids. which has to do with legislation, yes. For instance, hybridization, which here in Portugal it's almost, we can count by our fingers in the hand the number of cases. In certain countries, like UK, it exists for a long time. Poland, which is a country which is sometimes, we look at them as a not very modern country, but imposed automatically, unless there are strong reasons, hybridization is the rule. Again, all those things make this easier. Another thing which I raised slightly in my first address, incentives. So we cannot, let's see, I don't believe in charity, I believe in business with social returns. And again, in the case of grids, I think we cannot rely that the distributors do it because they want to have solidarity values, but because they must be retributed by the way they utilize the grids. So, in the end of the day, I could give many examples, but legislation is a must. What was done in the European Union is fundamental and helps. The countries must transpose, but besides those more obvious things to do, we have to think about those less obvious things, and the examples that I gave you are only examples.
Pedro, we've just heard from Valberga and João the importance of grids, and you've been studying these issues. João mentioned that we need to make better use of the grids that we have. It's not just a question of building added infrastructure. So how flexible are the electricity grids that we have? How flexible are they to accommodate the expansion of renewables, particularly from decentralized generation that we're talking about here today? And how can the decentralized generation systems, such as solar, be effectively integrated into existing grids while also making sure you don't overload them and that you're ensuring reliability and efficiency?
Good morning. Thank you for the question, David. So, first thing, grids are infrastructures, right? So, how flexible is an infrastructure? The flexibility doesn't come from the physical part of the infrastructure, but the way we manage it. So take a bridge, for instance, or a road. So a bridge is an infrastructure, right? So can we manage the traffic in a bridge? Yes, if we have control over the number of lanes that we are using in that bridge. If the traffic is very intense in one direction, I open additional lanes in that direction, but I have to reduce on the other, right? So direction, control of traffic can be done in a bridge that has a given physical dimension, physical capacity. So the question about capacity, in fact, is a twofold question. So there is a question about the physical capacity that is made available, and the question about the available instruments for managing that capacity. Not all bridges have variable control, variable number of lines, right? So the thing about electrical infrastructures is that they don't behave exactly the same way as road infrastructures. So in road infrastructures, we can afford jamming. So if there is an overload, there is a jam, right? In electrical infrastructures, there are no jamming. The power keeps flowing, and if there is an overload, you get a collapse. So this is a big difference. But on the other way around, there is an advantage, which is we don't have to control direction. If it works in one direction, it will work on the opposite direction exactly in the same way. So the big challenge about managing grids is the challenging of allowing the canceling of direction. So if we have a load and the generation at the same time in the same place, they cancel out. So I can have twice the value of the load if I can make it coincide with twice the generation if I can make it appear in the same time in the same place as the load does. So this is a big advantage. So not having to control direction is a big advantage. The disadvantage is that the net load, so the generation plus load, needs to be controlled in real time, because if we have an overload, we risk a collapse of the grid. Okay, so this is just to make the point that the flexibility is not in the infrastructure, is in the way we manage it. So can we manage the grids? Yes, there's a lot to be done regarding the increasing of the capacity of the grids to host distributed generation. There's a lot to be done. First thing, in low voltage grids, there's a lot of room for cancelling, because low voltage grids are unbalanced. So there are 3-phase plus neutral. So there are 4 wires there, 4 conductors there. So those conductors are not balanced in time. It's impossible to balance in time, but we can make an effort to try to do it, and that increases a lot the capacity that is available. And we can do the same with generation. If we try to balance generation as well, that is a big plus in the hosting capacity. Most of the solar panels that are being connected today are connected single phase. This is a big problem. They create big imbalances, and they create a big return of the neutral current that creates voltage problems. So this is something that we can do. It's affordable, is to try to balance the way loads are loaded. Sorry for the repetition. This is one thing. Another thing is managing the topology of the grid. So grids in low voltage and in medium voltage, they are radial, so not like roads. So there are no way we can make the circuit to go around. So it's just one way down or one way up. So because they are radial, the balancing is difficult unless we can reconfigure the grids. And grids can be reconfigured today quite easily. So there is remote control on the normally open points. We can change normally open points and try to make the cancelling more effective. Because if there is one load in one feeder is very loaded, the other there's a lot of generation, we just connect the two and open the circuit elsewhere. So this creates an opportunity that is quite effective to balance loads, to try to cancel those out. There are also other ways of doing it, which is using flexibility. So flexibility is very effective if, and this is an important thing, if it is under the control of the operator. Control here between commas. Because the one important thing is that today, the distribution system operators don't have many incentives to operate flexibility, right? So they are capex, so they are remunerated based on the investments they made. So if they don't make an investment, if they do something else, which is trying to make a long-term contract with a storage operator or a big client in order for that client to be flexible, they don't gain too much. Right? But the thing is, even though gaining or not, there is an opportunity there to avoid investment, and this is important because investment is going to be huge, and we need ways of postponing part of it. But flexibility is important. If we have storage, we can afford to do a much better balance of the load in the grids. The important thing here is that storage is just one way of doing it. It's one way, and flexibility as well. It's one way of sharing a surplus in time instead of sharing it in space, right? A grid allows sharing a surplus in space. I have something here that is too much for me. There's someone else that is not very far away from me, so electrically speaking. So I can share, if I have capacity in the grid, I can share in space. So if I cannot share in space, then I can store it and share in time with myself, right? So one thing that self-consumption does is to promote that. It promotes the sharing with yourself. Communities allow to share it with your neighbors, right? But all of this is sharing. Is sharing in time, right? So Communities is sharing in time and sharing in space at the same time. So there is a trade-off here between investing in the grids and investing in flexibility, right? Because they both try to solve the same problem, which is managing the surplus and the deficit of energy production.
Well, Adolfo, and Pedro's making the traffic analogy here, so it's probably a good time to move to the perspective of electric mobility. How is the electric mobility regulatory framework developed in Europe, and how is it linked to decentralized generation?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation and to share some insights of electric mobility. I've been working in the last 8 years. If you look from the energy perspective, the European regulation is pushing for electric mobility in the new AFIR regulation, the RED III directive, the directive for building energy efficiency, in a way that electric mobility is considered the path forward in mobility. But we shall not look only to this energy perspective when we look to electric mobility. We shall look also to the perspective that smart cities, decarbonization of the cities is also going on. A traffic jam of electric cars, it's still a traffic jam. So cities are in the middle of this puzzle. At the same time, they need and they want to create path for electric mobility because it's the way forward. But at the same time, they don't want cars in the city. And they are struggling in trying to find places to put charging points all over the city, because charging points compete for the same public space than other uses make. So this is one of the challenges that usually no one talks in energy forums, is that electric mobility is not only energy. And it's funny to see how electric mobility in Portugal is moving from ministry to ministry. There was once in infrastructures, then in the energy, then in environment. I think that now it's in infrastructures now. The government is quite new, so I'm sorry if I'm not saying this correctly, but I think it is. And I think it's the right place, infrastructures, because of some of the challenges that we are talking about here, but also because this comes in a more broader way. Of course, decentralized generation, this is the best example we can have, or one of the best examples we can have, where we can see the profits, the social profits of having decentralized energy, the possibility for buildings to interact and operate our cars also to give energy to the grid. But this comes also with challenges. The grid needs to have capacity to hold this. Smart grids and smart charging solutions are needed for this purpose. And in Europe, part of our cities, well, a huge part of our cities is old. Old buildings with no capacity, and this creates also a challenge. So from the public policy perspective, which is the one you asked me, it's about regulation. From the public policy perspective, there are several challenges that are creating hurdles in developing electric mobility in a faster way. And allow me just to give two more. One that it's not my impression, it's not my expression, the not in my backyard. The not in my backyard is an opposition to progress, even in the name of progress. So everyone wants electric mobility, but no solar panels in my building. Everyone wants electric mobility, but no charging points here in my garden. Everyone wants electric mobility, but no lithium batteries in Portugal being made. Everyone wants electric mobility, but. So the not in my backyard, which plus the climate activism and jurisdictional activism is also creating hurdles for public policy and regulators. So the fear to say, yes, we will have lithium in exploration in Portugal because we need for the batteries. Yes, we will need to have solar panels here because we need for the decarbonization. Yes, we need to have a broader charging points network because we need it for the electric vehicles. And that's another hurdle. It's not a regulatory, it's a political one, or from a public policy perspective, that I think that sometimes regulators also in Europe, they do not see clearly in our nowadays.
Well, let's go to the government perspective yet. So, Geronimo, we heard already from Mathilde, I talked with her a bit about the importance of implementation for this new European regulation that's come into being. What, from your perspective, are going to be the main challenges, what have been and what are going to be the main challenges faced by member states, particularly Portugal, in transposing European energy directives into national legislation, particularly when it comes to accelerating the execution of decentralized generation projects?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. This kind of discussions are always important because we are living challenging times and we need innovation and new ideas to overcome the challenge that many of those that are here with me today already stated. So I would say the first challenge is to ensure that the directives are consistent and coherent with national legislation. The energy sector is one of those sectors that, in terms of legal framework, needs a stable and predictability regulation. So that's the first challenge. Ensure that when you are transposing directives that are designed at a European level, that are designed to go align with 27 member states, that when you are transposing those directives, they do not create any hurdle in terms of what has been the progress of each member state regarding the energy transition. Also, there's also a great challenge because you need to mobilize a lot of resources in terms of government and entities and regulatory bodies in order to make this transition, this transposition the right way. We did it the right way sometimes, we did it not the best way in some cases. And this is a matter of how fast, how bold, and how innovative you want to be. And in many cases, like Portugal, where we have our targets set at a higher level, we need to go at 51% renewables by 2030. Portugal is one of only the 6 countries in Europe that must go beyond 50% renewables by 2030. That's a fact. And when you have such a high targets, the transposition of these directives are more challenging. Because if you want to meet those targets, you need to ensure that your legal framework is in place, has the right conditions to execute the policy. So that's one of the key issues, is how far, how fast you want to go. So in terms of execution of distribution production in Portugal, additional challenges may arise when you are transposing these directives. Let me remind that Portugal was one of the first countries in Europe to adopt the concept of energy communities in the law back in 2019. So that's already in the Portuguese law. We still have a lot to do in terms of practical implementation of these projects, but we already did the first steps in terms of having these kind of projects in Portugal. So we need to further simplify the licensing. That's something that is in the RED 3. We need to facilitate the access to networks. We need to encourage investment in distributed technologies. And also, we need to address regulatory barriers that are blocking sometimes innovation and the adoption of these technologies. So, in the case of RED 3, this is only one of the directives that we have to face in the next years in terms of European legislation. There are some cases that will be quite challenging. First of all, we need to reduce, as I mentioned, the licensing time for energy production facilities that needs to be less than a month. In Portugal, for example, when it comes to medium to large scale projects, if everything is done correctly by the promoter, it's taking us up to 2 to 3 months to license a project. We are not yet within the time that we want. If we are talking about a distributed project, it takes us at least a month to take the full process concluded. So we need to work on reducing the licensing time. We need to strengthen the transparency in terms of providing information to stakeholders, mainly by network operators. Sometimes what we hear from promoters that they need to have access to greater and more transparent information from grid operators in order to develop their projects faster. So that's something that is on the RED 3. Also, we'll need to increase the limit of the capacity for prior communication from 30 kilowatts to 100 kilowatts. That will speed up the implementation of distributed grids, and I'm sure that we can go beyond that threshold. It's something that we are discussing with grid operators in order to increase the threshold of certain installations, and also in terms of building construction, we'll need to improve building construction codes in order to accelerate also the implementation of this project. Let me tell you that we already taking the first steps in terms of transposing this particular directive to the Portuguese legislation, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us. We have a first deadline by 1st of July this year in order to have some provisions already in the Portuguese law, and by 2025, May of 2025, full transposition of RED 3. That's a challenge because we haven't finished yet the RED 2. We have some missing links in terms of RED 2, so we cannot afford to miss this opportunity regarding RED 3, so we need to speed up our job. But it's important to highlight that we are, in terms of legislation and rules for distribution production, we are one of the most advanced countries in Europe regarding laws and rules. It's not yet perfect. We still have a lot of work to do. As João Mansonet mentioned, we still have some obstacles to overcome. And the proof of that is that we have increased our installed capacity for distributed generation by 600% since 2017. In 2017, we had around 280 megawatts of installed capacity. And February, we overcome the 2 gigawatt target regarding distributed generation. So that's quite an achievement because 2 gigawatts was the target that was proposed in our National Energy Climate Plan by 2030. So we anticipated 6 years. That means that we still have a lot of potential to overcome. And but even with all these advances, we want to do it better and faster. And just to conclude, because we are the licensing entity in Portugal regarding these projects, our main objective is to have by June this year the platform for licensing of projects fully operational. By June this year. It's not yet perfect. It's far from perfect. We acknowledge that. But it will be a huge step for this sector to at least be able, from step 0 until the full implementation of the project, to be fully digital. You can know where is your project in terms of licensing. You can see all of the components of the project if they are already fully licensed. And of course, after this first step, it's very important to have the platform fully operation. We want to go and do more investments to have these digital tools in place, fully operation, and with all the tools needed to speed up as fast as we can.
Thanks for walking us through that. Yeah, we'll say Portugal is far from alone in having not fully transposed RED 2 before now having to transpose RED 3. I think this is something a number of member states are going to be confronting here. Valberga, I wanted to ask you a question that is a big topic in Brussels, where we're based, which is about the supply chain and supply chain vulnerabilities, supply chain blips, supply chain disruptions. The whole discussion around supply chains and how they relate to clean technology like solar panels has been a big debate in European level. What are the challenges that we're grappling with right now, and what's being done to address them, particularly when it comes to the technological solutions that are needed for decentralized energy?
Thanks for that question, because indeed it's something that is preoccupying us very much in Brussels at the moment. Maybe just first, I still want to really congratulate you on what you're doing on permitting. It's so important to digitalize those permitting procedures, because it's one of the big bottlenecks. I haven't mentioned it because grids indeed at the moment is the most prominent, but permitting really
This is just the first step, because
Yeah.
we are going also to, in order to digitalize all the licensing for large-scale project also. This is just the case of a small and localized production. We are also moving with we called one-stop shop for renewables, that in the end, all of this will be combined in one specific one-stop shop for that's the goal.
So really great. Now to your question.
Sorry.
Supply chains. Yes, in renewables and solar, obviously are homegrown electricity sources, which have been saving us through the energy crisis and also the geopolitical difficulties that we are having. So, and this is why the European Commission has been putting a lot of emphasis on going faster in deploying renewables, deploying solar. But it is true, so as soon as we have panels installed in Europe, we're safe, kind of. Our energy is secure. But it's true that 90%, almost 90% of those panels at the moment are coming from China. And this is of concern to European policymakers, and this is also of concern to us as an industry, that, and we've seen that during the pandemic, that we had some supply chain disruptions. And for whatever reason, you know, such disruptions could also happen again at any point in time. So resilience is very important, and a very important topic that we've been discussing over the last 2-3 years. We as Solar Power Europe have been pushing since 5 years actually to make policymakers aware of that fact and to make sure that we are diversifying supply chains, but that we are also investing in having at least a number of companies again that are competitive in Europe and that are producing not just panels but the whole supply chain, you know, starting from polysilicon, ingots, wafers, cells, and modules. Now, it is a fact that, you know, I was mentioning 90%, but I mean, last year, the number that we could cover with European production was around 2 to 3% of last year's demand. So a very, very small segment. Europe has been leading 15 years back in manufacturing, but, you know, we are not leading anymore. It is China which is leading. So again, resilience is a topic that is very important. Now, the European Union has taken measures. They have been putting forward a plan on industrial resilience, an industrial plan for key technologies, not just solar, for key green tech technologies, but also solar. So the plan is to reshore some 30 gigawatt of solar production to Europe along the whole supply chain by 2030. That's the plan. The reality is that Europe is struggling very heavily to bring those 30 gigawatt online, because the companies that we have today and that want to upscale and produce more in order to reach the 30 gigawatt are struggling because of low prices of modules. So there are measures that are taken by the European Union, which is, for example, the Net Zero Industry Act, which will be implemented in a couple of months' time. Has also been some relief on state aid. You know, previously, so before Russia invaded the Ukraine, there was no possibility for subsidies to manufacturing companies. This has been revised. It is not enough yet, because, you know, there needs to be huge financing going into manufacturing in order to upscale them so that they have a size which at some point can be competitive at a global scale, and that we are not there yet. So there's a couple of measures that are taken, but it's not enough yet. We see bankruptcies in the meanwhile, closure of production facilities. At least when it comes to polysilicon to modules. What I should mention as well is that we are still having a thriving inverter industry in Europe. So we have companies that are producing, that have been producing some 70 gigawatt of inverters last year, and are still considered to be competitive at a global level. They're also exporting, but they also face more and more difficulties. But this is an industry where Europe is still at the front runner, and that should be kept. But all of that makes that we had serious discussions in the last couple of months about whether we should close the borders, whether we should have trade defense measures that make that, panels that are produced outside of Europe should have more difficulties to come into Europe. That would be a complete lose-lose strategy. From our perspective, we've been really fighting a lot against such ideas because we truly believe we cannot, so that there needs to be two goals that are equally important: to deploy solar and deploy renewables as fast as possible, but also to bring back manufacturing to Europe. And when you're closing the borders, you're just cutting off the deployment side. The market would be completely collapsing. It would not help anyone, not the deployment side, but also not the manufacturers, because they need demand. So we need to, rather than having trade defense measures, import tariffs, for example, we need to have targeted measures to support a European industry, to support resilience and bring back, to some extent, manufacturing to Europe so that we are resilient. But it should not come at the cost of going less fast in the energy transition than we're doing. One last thing I want to mention, because it is really something which is coming up in the next couple of days, is that member states, together with the European Commission and the industry, who are acknowledging, that we need to bring back some, to some extent, manufacturing to Europe, will be signing a solar charter. The Belgian presidency has been bringing that up. So it is some commitments that member states are making, that the industry is making, and also the European Commission is making. The charter is supposed to be signed next Monday at the Energy Council meeting, and I would hope that Portugal would also be able to sign it. We, as an industry, we're encouraging our members to sign it. It is about, voluntarily in the portfolio take up European products in order to also help, in order to bring manufacturing back to Europe to a certain extent, with at the same time leaving the borders open, because we cannot afford to slow down the energy transition.
Let's talk a little bit about cooperation, how we can get better cooperation between countries. João, for companies that are operating in multiple markets, even within the European Union, we have this European framework, but as we've heard already today, the situation can differ between member states, particularly in different ways that they're implementing directives. Now, Greenvolt has developed this idea of building a pan-European platform for decentralized generation specifically. So what would be the advantages of that type of platform, and why would it add added value to the various markets?
Thank you very much for the question.
You've got that microphone?
Oh, sorry. Before addressing this question, I would just, if you allow me to speak about two things. First point is to congratulate Decentralized for its commitment to have the full platform in June. I won't forget that. And I do believe on you. So if you are saying that, I'm sure it will happen. Second, it's very important, and really very important, because the things are nice if they work, and they are improving, and I confirm that, but June as a full productive, it's good. Second, about the reindustrialization, I could not speak about this, but frankly, I cannot resist. It's a mistake. Having 90% of the panels coming from China is a mistake. But creating a subsidized industry of panels, which has very low value added, I think it's not the best way of doing the things, really. And we cannot want to have globalization and at the same time not having globalization. And frankly, I'm very skeptical about those issues, this way of acting. So we have to cut the monopoly from China, fully agree. But the way of doing it is not creating with low value added products an industry in Europe which is going to be subsidized. And for how many years do we, as consumers, want to keep financing subsidized industries? Let's see, we speak about wind turbines. They are not subsidized because they have technology. And for that, they provide things that the Chinese don't provide in terms of the wind. So they are there. We have Vestas, we have Siemens, that I expect will overcome these problems. We have GE, and they are much stronger in Europe than the Chinese one because they have technology, they have after-work service. So they are better, not because the states protect, because they are better. And if you want to avoid that inverters go, the companies must invest, cannot be lazy, have to invest in R&D. The same with transformers, all this. So this is really, and so what could be the solution? If I had something to do with this, what I would do is to promote European investment in other countries, giving guarantees. For instance, perhaps in Morocco or in Africa could be excellent places where the Europeans should invest and have diversified for that point. So, my opinion, so it's not a question, but I don't resist to speak about this. I think it's not, I think the Commission made excellent work and is making an excellent work in terms of the energy transition, but I think that this trend to reinforce a locally and subsidized industry with low value added, it's not, perhaps, I would not do like that. Regarding the question that raised me, let's see, we had chosen to have a multinational approach, to be in several countries with a multinational approach, and I think this is something which is being fruitful, because more and more there are companies, multinationals from multinational in industry, multinational real estate, who wants to speak with one operator, which gives them a full solution, the same contract model, the same PPA model, the same philosophy in avoiding discussions case by case. And I think this is something that we have been able to do it. Companies, for that to be successful, must be able to discuss from a legal point of view at a global level, must be able to have a global procurement. And so I think this is, and one of the advantages of having a global approach is that we can export the best practice. We have spoken of that the countries are not all of them at the same level in terms of legislation. This multinational approach, besides promoting the business we can do today, educate the companies that in this country we can do this. For instance, we can sell the surplus to the network, others they cannot, some. And so I would say that we'll find new allies to promote near their governments the need to export the best practice in terms of the commercial area and in terms of relative. So I do believe strongly that our multinational approach, which begins to give fruits, we'll see today in the afternoon one case of a multinational, not Portuguese, a multinational, who are with us in several markets, and so I think this is important. The last thing that I would like to say is the following. Even when we have, and we have, a multinational approach and certain scale economies, we always need some local structure. So we cannot say that the local design of the products are made everything central. It's not. So the multinational approach must coexist with some local approach for two reasons. Firstly, to comply with the local requirements in terms of engineering, in terms of regulation. And second, you see, we can have a company very much centralized, but if the local people don't buy the product, it's not going to work. So having people local, which also convince the local people from multinational of this approach is very important. Finally, we have a multinational approach, but in any country where we are, for us, the most important are the local companies. This next way, the next way of approaching is also like that. So multinational approach, yes, but most of our clients will be always local. So local and having empowered people locally, it's very important.
Pedro, can this multinational cooperation approach also benefit the grids and in particular the expansion of electricity networks?
I'm not sure, but I hope so. So the thing is, the thing about grids is that we don't need the grids just because of the renewables. We need the grids because there is a electrification process of consumption going on, a very important one. If you look at the decarbonization plans for Portugal, for instance, those that are in the roteiro for neutralidade carbónica, we are expecting load per capita loads to grow 100%. So it's twice the value that we have today in 25 years. So we are growing, we are doubling our loads in 25 years, and it took 100 years to come to the point that we are now. So this is huge. So everybody knows that nowadays, but the thing is, the supply chains for the not very high technological equipment of grids, most of that equipment, cables, transformers, etc., the supply chains are failing already. So the prices are rising for transformers. And we are expecting those supply chains to fail as well. And this is a big issue, right? So, and I don't know if the equipment comes from China or not. Probably some of it will come, but this is one of the major bottlenecks for the transition, and someone needs to take care of that. Another important thing is that when we look at the grids, and everybody talks about that, we want to operate the grids closer to their limits. But grids don't work well close to their limits. So they are not supposed to work close to their limits. There is something called the Kelvin law, a very old law from Kelvin, that says that grids should operate at the level where their losses, energy losses, compensate for the increasing investment in capacity. And when we look at low voltage grids, that capacity is very low compared to the maximum. So if we want to operate in an efficient way, grids, and we will be worried about efficient in the long term, now we are just worried about effectiveness, right? Because we are in a transition process. So, but at the long term, efficiency will be important for the grids as well. And grids are not supposed to work close to their limits. It's bad economics, okay? So people say, we want to explore grids at the maximum. Okay, but this is for effectiveness, not for efficiency. So there is a big issue around this. This is an important thing. We need to build, according to the International Energy Agency, we need to build 80 million kilometers of grids by 2040. This is a big issue. I don't know how that can be solved at the European level. I think the European Commission has done it a lot already by promoting flexibility markets and flexibility as a flexibility, promoting the appearance of flexibility contracts as something that will replace physical assets. So today, the utilities have to plan their grids, not just looking at alternatives for investment in reinforcement their own assets, but also looking at alternatives to contract flexibility as long-term contracts with the clients. This is something that can allow us to survive for the next few years, and allow us also to survive if the supply chains will fail. So this is I don't see anything else that the Commission can do at the European level besides putting that to work, the flexibility markets. This is something that is not easy, because as I said that, Dr. Mansuneto also said that, there are not incentives in place for the utilities to do that. The utilities are doing that in a voluntarist way. And so this is not sustainable. So some incentives, utilities must have some incentives to do that as something sustainable for the next decade or so.
We're just about out of time, but before we go to the coffee break, Geronimo, I did want to ask you, because the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive has been referenced a couple times here, and that's coming to fruition as we speak. How is that going to make a difference here in Portugal in terms of implementing these types of projects that we've been talking about? Is it going to be a game changer?
I would say it will be a huge challenge, first of all. If RED 3 is a challenge, EPBD and building renovation is an even higher challenge. Because, first of all, there are some provisions in the directive that will pose quite a challenge when it comes to Portugal and other countries, I'm sure. The first one is that we already have in Portugal a strategy for renovation of buildings that set out targets and a trajectory for renovation of buildings. And the EPBD goes beyond what we already have in Portugal. For you to have an idea, the EPBD imposes a reduction of 16% in primary energy consumption in residential buildings by 2030, which compares to 11% in what we have in our strategy. So we have to go further. And what we have seen in terms of energy consumption in buildings, compared to, for instance, 2020, we saw an increase of energy consumption. So that's the first challenge. Another challenge is that in RED 3, for instance, targets for countries are different. Each country set out a different target when comparing to their own resources and compared to their own strategy. On EPBD, in energy efficiency targets, the target is the same for everybody. Reduction of energy consumption is the same for every country. And Portugal, much as southern countries of Europe, we are different in terms of energy consumption when compared to northern countries. We don't have the same heat and cooling needs compared to those countries. So imposing the same level of energy reduction to all European countries is not fair. It's not fair for us because what we are witnessing, not only in terms of the residential buildings where we will have increased energy needs in the future because we'll have more electrified homes with more heat pumps, with more systems and so on. And also in terms of the economic side of this is that Portugal is attracting more business, more industries, more services that will demand more energy. So in the end, we'll consume more energy in the future than today. So how can we meet the energy reduction targets without imposing restrictions to our economic growth into our society? So that's something that we have been telling the Commission is that you need to be flexible and you need to have targets defined according to each country specificities. So that's the first huge challenge that we have, is how to meet the targets without sacrificing something else that we won't. Because other countries in the past that had cheap gas, cheap coal, cheap oil were able to grow their economies. And now what we are seeing is that we have cheap renewable resources and we want to take advantage of that and bring new businesses, new industries to Portugal in order to increase our economic growth. So that's the first challenge. The other challenge, and I won't take long because the time is running out, is in terms of financial incentives and market barriers. Member states are obliged to adopt and to have support measures in order to make this strategy, this renovation strategy, a reality. And the numbers that the European Commission has provided is that they will need 3 trillion euros to fund this EPBD and energy efficiency until 2030, and only around 8% will come from public funds. So the other 19% will have to come from private and financial institutions. So how can we will be able to provide this financial support to make a reality this huge transformation? This is a transformation, not a transition. Like in the energy sector, I think we already gone by the transition and now we are on the transformation side. On building sector, this is a huge transformation, especially for countries like Portugal that have a very low renovation rate. So these two realities, I think, will be the main challenges regarding EPBD transposition. Of course, there are opportunities for the distributed generation, because there are mandates to increase and to adapt buildings for these kind of installations. There are opportunities for medium and small businesses, because this will require a lot of workload, a lot of new businesses, a lot of equipment. So this is also a challenge, an opportunity for small to medium companies. So I'll wrap up like, thank you.
Yep, that makes sense. Adolfo, speaking of the regulatory changes that are coming in for buildings, we've also had a whole bunch for transport, right? So what do you think needs to happen at national level in these coming years in order to get a faster deployment of electric mobility, particularly given all the new regulatory changes we have?
Our legal framework is quite outdated. He was prior to the directive, so it was a pioneer. It was in 2010. The framework, I think it's still updated, but of course, we need to revise the diploma. It was being revised by the previous government. Let's see how things go. Things that need clearly to be revised. First, the licensing of the charging points is not related to the General Directorate, just in the part that I'm complaining, is municipalities. It's municipalities precisely in their job of being owners of the public space, not the energy licensing, but the public space licensing has been a huge hurdle. And of course, directed to the question we are talking about here is the self-consumption. So the diploma, in my opinion, does not prevent that, but it needs to be regulated. Needs to be regulated for the self-consumption, and also smart charging and vehicle to the grid mechanisms need to be incentivized by the diploma, which has not. But still, the diploma is updated in what concerns the philosophy of the diploma. I think that we have a very user-friendly legal regime in Portugal, which means that compared to other countries, one user can charge his vehicle in any point of the grid, no matter whom he's buying energy from. And we don't need to play with different cards in order to organize our travel. So if you go from Lisbon to the Pyrenees, you'll see that from the Portuguese territory it will be easy for you to travel, but as soon as you cross the border, you will have much more complications. So this principle of the system, I think we should keep. It comes with a cost, but we should keep to make it to still solve the problem of the egg and the chicken that we still have in the electric mobility. Figures in Portugal are still booming in what concerns the number of electric cars that are being sold, and also the expansion of the grid. But in other countries, we see that things are cooling down about the number. People are waiting for new technologies in order to be sure that they want to go fully into a full electric car. So I hope that this government will revise the diploma without jeopardizing the main principles that I think they are correct. And of course, self-consumption needs to be regulated as soon as possible.
Yeah, for sure. There's still a lot of work to be done. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. I want to thank the panelists for some really interesting interventions and perspectives on these regulatory changes, the market changes, all of the changes we're going through right now in what is moving pretty fast. So how about a round of applause for our excellent panelists? So we're now going to take a coffee break that will last for 25 minutes. We'll be right outside these doors in the lobby. If you're watching us online from your home or office, you can make yourself a nice little Nespresso cafe, and you can join us back here at 12:10 Lisbon time, where we'll be talking about how we finance some of the projects that we've just been talking about. So we'll see you back here then.
got to roll me, got to roll me, got to roll me, got to roll me, got to roll me.
won't. So love me, hold me, love me, hold me. I'm free to do what I please, and no time. I'm free and no time to get what I want. So love me, hold me, love me, hold me. I'm free and no time to get what I want.
If I could stick my pen in my heart, I'd spill it all over the stage. What is satisfying? What is light on fire? Would you think this boy is strange? Ain't he strange? If I could win you, if I could sing you a love song so divine, would it be enough for your cheating heart? If I broke down and cried, if I cried, I know it's only rock and roll, but I like it. I said, I know it's only rock and roll, but I like it, like it. Yes, I do. Well, I like it. Oh, yes, I like it. I like it. I said, can't you see that this old boy has been lonely? If I could stick a knife in my heart, suicide right on the stage, would it be enough for your teenage lust? Would it help to ease the pain? Ease the brain? If I could dig down deep in my heart, feelings would float on the page. Would it satisfy you? Would it light on fire? Would you think this boy is insane? He's insane. I know it's only rock and roll, but I like it. I said, I know it's only rock and roll, but I like it, like it. Yes, I do. Well, I
saw her today at the reception. A glass of wine in her hand. I knew she was gonna meet her connection. At her feet was her footloose man. And you can't
All right, welcome back everyone from the coffee break. I hope you had some great networking opportunities, some great conversations about decentralized energy. As promised, we're now going to move on to the next panel where we'll be talking about how we finance these types of projects that we've been talking about so far this morning. The title of the panel is Financial Models for Decentralized Energy Investing Without Unbalancing the Books. Let's start off with a kickoff video.
Investing in this change is necessary and possible. The sooner we act, the closer we come to realizing a sustainable energy transition. Building it on solid financial foundations is achievable. Every company has the opportunity to join the movement easily and reap the rewards.
So our panelists can come join us up here on stage. We're going to get an overview of the current financial strategies available to companies to finance their commitments to decentralized generation. And then we'll also talk about other types of models, all types of different models really, of financing these projects. There's a variety of different financial strategies that companies can use to finance their decentralized generation projects, schemes such as power purchasing agreements, which we already heard about a bit this morning. Those are schemes where buyers and sellers agree ahead of time a fixed price for a long period, and that can provide the certainty that investors need. Or alternatively, there's engineering, procurement, and construction, EPC financing, which can alleviate the perceived risks that investors might see, particularly in large-scale projects, by assigning responsibility to a single outside contractor. These are just two models. There's other models out there, and other ones continue to evolve. There's new financial models for financing these projects that maybe haven't even been thought of yet. So on this panel, we're going to talk to three different types of financiers: a public investor, a private equity investor, and a private bank. They also represent three stages of investing: a facilitating actor for early stages, capital deployment for middle stages, and local knowledge investing for later stages. I'll be asking these three panelists who are representing these different types how we can get this financing moving and whether they see decentralized generation as a cost-effective and attractive option for investors, and what are their perceptions of the risks of such investments. So let me introduce you to them. Now we have here Gilles Badeau, who is Director of Operations for the Adriatic Sea and Iberia departments at the European Investment Bank. We have Deepak Haria, who is Head of Infrastructure Debt for EMEA at the investment firm BlackRock. And we have Americo Corolla, who is Head of the Investment Banking Division at Millennium BCP. Welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for joining me here for this panel. Gilles, let's start with a question for you. The EIB is an important investor for Europe, we know. How does the EIB see itself as a player in facilitating investment in renewable energy infrastructure, particularly for your department?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for the question and for inviting the EIB. I think one step back maybe just to present a bit the EIB. The EIB is the climate bank of Europe. We have decided in 2019 to stop our investments to the fossil fuel projects. So we were one of the pioneers in taking that decision. And we have decided to label ourselves the Green Bank of Europe, to play a key role in supporting the Green Deal of the European Union. We've got three goals in this climate roadmap that we have decided. We have the role to, we have decided to try to mobilize 1 trillion of investments over the decade 2021-2030, which will be the critical decade if we want to have an impact on the way energy is produced and the climate action is evolving. We have decided on our side also to to be fully Paris aligned. In any of the investment that we are financing, we are Paris aligned. We are not financing projects that are not considered as Paris aligned. And the third decision that we've made was to dedicate at least 50% of our activity towards climate action. And I think that was quite important. And if you look concretely at what it means that we are supporting very strongly the renewable energy sector. I think it has been reinforced also with the Ukraine crisis. With REPowerEU, we have decided to support the policy, the REPowerEU policy that has been launched by the Commission. So instead of going back to fossil fuel, finding solution in order to import gas from other countries, we have decided to accelerate and to speed up investments in renewable energy. We've financed 7.2 billion euro in 2022. We've financed 9.3 billion euro in 2023 for renewable energy projects. So at the scale of Europe, it is quite important. We were talking a lot about the grid reinforcement and resilience. We are putting a lot of effort in investing in the grid. And here, for example, in Portugal, we've signed a project in 2023 with REN for 450 million euro in order to reinforce the grid and to enable also to have the connection to make it easier to connect renewable energy projects. And the third pillar of our action is, of course, energy efficiency. We talked a lot about buildings in the first panel. It's always more efficient not to consume energy rather than produce energy. And that's also something that we are trying to develop, trying to help projects that are saving energies. And that will be something that will be important for the future. So this is a bit what the EIB is doing. We have also tried to observe this market of the decentralized renewable energy, which is, I would say, a market that is trying to find its way. We know that there are some problematics related to risks, related to various aspects that are still to be developed and tackled if we want to make it more efficient. But we think that it's also an important market because it will show that also the citizens are concerned by the climate action, and they are also trying to find their own solution, developing on their side their status of prosumers, being producers but also consumers. So it is something that we look with a lot of attention. Yeah.
Deepak, let's turn to you next. BlackRock, obviously a very significant investor. How does an institutional investor like BlackRock see the possibility of deploying capital in energy projects like the ones we've been talking about?
Thanks, Dave, and real pleasure to be here today in Lisbon. I think maybe it would help if I start off just explaining where BlackRock sits in all of this. So BlackRock, as many of you might know, is the world's leading asset manager. Within that, for infrastructure, BlackRock currently manages around $50 billion equivalent of infrastructure debt and equity. I sit within the debt business, and we have about $25 billion of infrastructure debt under management across the world, including Europe, the UK, the US, and elsewhere. From that perspective, we're managing money on behalf of insurance companies, pension funds, and other large institutional investors who are really kind of looking to us to put their money to work, typically on a very long-term basis, in projects and investments that can ensure a long-term resilient return and one that ideally provides them with a return above public markets. So from that perspective, the energy market and sort of renewable energy, and particularly decentralized energy, we feel is going to play an increasingly important part. We can probably evidence that through some of the activities where, from a debt perspective, we've financed a number of rooftop solar portfolios and other types of rooftop solar business models, including leasing throughout Europe, the UK, and indeed in the US. There are a number of different models that we've seen start to take shape, some of them which we consider to be investable today, others which we believe still need some work, whether it's regulatory drivers to help align the incentives or to provide greater visibility of cash flows, or in some instances, whether it's about understanding the consumer landscape, where you have a number of different householders or industrial and commercial owners, operators, and users of the energy. So from that perspective, it was really interesting listening to the earlier panel this morning, where there was a good deal of discussion around consumers as suppliers or producers, where actually that's one part of the value chain and the model that we are looking at with great interest. From the perspective of a finance provider, what we'd really love to see is a model whereby we can really have that long-term visibility of understanding what can those cash flows look like on either side. We know very well, and we have a good and detailed understanding, as does the market, of large-scale generation under PPAs or previously under subsidy frameworks, and how those can help to get projects off the ground. What we really need to see is that kind of approach being applied to decentralized energy projects, so that we can really make sure that we can provide good and solid, viable, long-term financing to those kind of projects.
Americo, you're coming from the perspective of a local credit institution. So what type of difference can a local credit institution make in financing energy projects, and particularly decentralized energy projects?
Thank you very much, David. Well, let me start by congratulating Greenvolt for this initiative. I think it's a very positive and interesting initiative, and thanking João and the Greenvolt team for having me here. Well, I would start by tackling your question by saying that I think a local bank, a local institution, a bank like BCP, a market leader, it's always essential and does always have a role in the businesses, in the developments that are happening in the country. And I think that clearly is a premise of what we try to do, to try to serve the communities, serve the economy, and the society. And that is even more critical here, because Deepak was talking about, well, we have been financing centralized energy for decades now. And what we are seeing here is really a disruption in the financing model, because we are bringing to the center of the financing the consumers that were somehow out of the financing model when we talk about a generator, a distributor, a PPA, a contract between these two parties. It's clearly a risk that it's easy to analyze, easy to tackle, easy to evaluate. When we bring the consumers in, when we bring the off-takers to this financing equation, it's even more critical to have local knowledge, to have a bank that understands the intricacies of the local market, that understands, that has the relationships with the most part of the economy, with its clients, and that clearly has an established business model based on relationship and on the relationship and on the capacity to serve basically all the financial needs of those clients. And this is another one. So we are in an early stage, a stage where it's difficult for a global institution to understand and to be able to evaluate all these risks. So I would say that a local bank such as Millennium BCP, a market leader in banking with individuals, families, and companies, clearly has a pivotal role, because bridging this gap between these ground root initiatives and the absence of a global player or global players that certainly will have difficulty. It's difficult for someone who is not operating in the market to be able to evaluate the risk of SMEs, small corporates, even bigger corporates. So I would say that this knowledge come clearly as an advantage to the market, being able and to this new concept, let's call it like this, of distributed generation. It's very good to be able to be in these early stages and be able to contribute somehow to the shaping of the market, because like Deepak was saying, I think we'll have to establish clearly the models, because when we are talking about financing, clearly we need to, and going back to the title of our panel, financing without unbalancing the books, obviously we have to go to off-balance finance, to project finance. Clearly in the beginning, generators are financing these decentralized efforts with own funds and corporate facilities. But if we want to grow the market, if we want the market to grow, the project finance will have to be used, and this clearly is the local banks bridging this gap can be clearly an accelerator of this market. And somehow, and I believe that in the future, obviously there will be opportunities in capital markets, but clearly not now. So it's crucial, absolutely key to have local institutions, especially institutions with knowledge in this sector, knowledge in project finance. We in Millennium BCP are doing project finance in renewables for more than 2 decades, since the beginning in Portugal. We have close relationship with the main players in this market. So I think we are very well placed to contribute to the growth of this market.
And we'll come back to the subject of risk assessment that you touched upon a bit later in the panel. Gilles, we know that there are several different types of ways to finance a project. Joao was talking about subsidies earlier and the pros and cons of the subsidy approach. But aside from subsidies, you can have loans, you can have guarantees, you can have matching finance from public money that can then encourage private investment to come in. What do you think is the best way to structure public funding for decentralized generation projects out of all the different options that a public investor has?
It's quite a tricky question. I think it took a while first to get used to renewable energy financing, to go from corporate towards PF. And because initially there were technological risk, there were volume risk, and there was, of course, the tariff risk, and the problem of the intermittence of the energy. So at the end, now we are in a world where We don't need any more the feed-in tariff. We can live with merchant price because we've got reliable assets, we've got tested technology, we've got very low prices, and this is maybe thanks to the feed-in tariff policy that we have had during years. Now, you still have the problem of the intermittence, meaning that everybody produces at the same time in the day, whatever the consumption is, and the problem of the fluctuation of the market price. I mean, I've heard that this problem of the market price will be mitigated by the new regulation that is implemented, that is planned to be implemented by the Commission, but still. And on top of that, when we talk about decentralized generation, we add additional issues, which are the fact that you've got different players, potentially. So if you're talking about households, you need to manage a sort of fragmented portfolio of borrower in a certain way. You've got a difficulty to have securities on your assets, or you've got interface issues because you're on the roof of property that you don't have any right on. And you have also the issue of entering into efficient PPAs if you remain locals, or you need to have a sort of long-term view if you want to lend on the long term. So I think that we've got a complex universe, a complex number of constraints to tackle to elaborate a winning financing solution. Saying that, I mean, of course, we will need loans, and I think I fully agree with what Americo said, that we need to have, at a certain point, an approach that will enable us to finance with limited recourse, because it will be our way to leverage and to speed up a bit investment in this field. But I think, for the moment, as I see things, we need local banks that have with which we can leverage on their local presence, on their knowledge of the market, on their knowledge of the SMEs or the households, as the case may be, in order to aggregate in a certain way a convincing portfolio of assets that we could on our side finance and help them to finance. Or it could be through corporate loans for the moment, having a corporate that does that work, that will take on their balance sheet the risk of lending to this structure, and us leveraging on them. But I agree with you, on the long term, we'll have to find a way to make it with limited recourses if we want to increase the impact and to develop these markets. So let's say that loans are clearly the key. I would say that limited recourse loans would be the purpose, what we should aim at. But in the short term, at least at the EIB, because we are, as I mentioned, we are lending big volumes in a certain way. Our only way to work in this sector is to work through local banks that manage to gather all these stakeholders in one project, or going through a corporate that do the same work. We have tried a few years ago to work in a structure, using a structure of securitization, and it has been highly complicated, in fact, because you need also to have first loss piece in order to absorb the risk. It is something that we've done in the water sector, for example, in Italy, gathering through mini bonds, different players, putting them together. Maybe it's a way that we could tackle this market, but right now I can't answer you with a firm answer. It's a market that needs to develop. That would be my answer.
Deepak, we know that decentralized energy projects come with their own circumstances. So for you as an institutional investor, when you're determining investment in one of these types of projects or one of these types of companies, what criteria do you consider to be most important, particularly when you're evaluating risk?
So I think we sort of, coming at it from a sort of infrastructure financier or project financier mindset, there are a number of the risks that we see in more traditional utility scale renewable projects that we need to consider, many of which I agree with Gilles on. So things like production risk. I think technology risk we're much more comfortable with, but clearly, as we've heard from the earlier panels, and I fully agree with this, for decentralized energy to work at scale, it requires storage, it requires metering, it requires other solutions to go with it. So there's still some additional technological risk that we need to consider, and whether or not the storage, the term or the life cycle of the storage can meet the life cycle of the panels and the inverters. We then start to think about what are the other risks that we could face in some of these types of structures. And in many instances of the types of projects that we've seen to date, there are some new risks that from an infrastructure standpoint, we would not class as sort of typical or traditional infrastructure risks that we can understand, ascertain, and manage easily. One of those where you have a residential solar model is understanding the credit risk associated with the household or the consumer who is acquiring or leasing the panels. So taking consumer credit risk is not something that we're typically used to doing on a sort of infrastructure or project finance basis. That is something that may come into play in some of these decentralized models. Likewise, if it is a portfolio of commercial and industrial solar, then you may have some credit risks around SMEs as tenants. Beyond that, you may also have real estate risks, which again is not something that I would typically associate with the types of projects that we've financed. So as Gilles mentioned, be it just knowing that whoever is managing or maintaining the portfolio can access the roof space. If a leaseholder were not to maintain payments under a rental scheme, then is it possible to take any kind of security over that or not? So there are some new risks that we need to start to understand and deal with, and this is where I think having really strong local players with a presence and knowledge of the market over a number of years, including an understanding of how those sort of building blocks can be put together to put together a financing solution around that, will be absolutely critical. So I think you could see a number of different models take shape. We've also noted that in the US, you have asset-backed securitization of rooftop solar PV. That has become quite popular over the last number of years. And again, a lot of that is based much more on a consumer finance model where you have a huge history of consumer credit scores, and you can take a much more diversified portfolio view across it. Those kind of financing technologies could be brought into Europe, and we could find a way to make them work, but they are extremely complex, as Gilles mentioned. The EIB, I'm sure, has spent plenty of time on thinking through how those could work. We could think about maybe there are guarantees from the right kind of players that could underpin some of those risks as well, to make sure that we could really put forward these off-balance sheet solutions. So I think there are ways and means, but there are a number of different risks that perhaps traditional infrastructure finance players are not used to, that we will have to start getting our heads around.
That's interesting that you mentioned that some of the perceived risks are around things that almost sound like more traditional real estate investing. I mean, does previous experience with real estate portfolio investing, then can it inform on some of those risk assessment issues for these types of projects?
Absolutely. I think looking at it from a sort of institutional debt perspective, to start to get underneath some of these decentralized energy projects and hopefully put money to work, we would actually be looking to some of our real estate financing colleagues or other structured finance colleagues to help put together the solutions that could be appropriate here. I think you've got to look at where have these types of solutions been used before in other sectors or industries, and how can we bring them together for decentralized energy and infrastructure.
If I may,
yeah.
On that aspect, I think it's more similar to the consumer-based approach than on the residential mortgage-based securitization, because it's a question of having the security. You don't have a security here. It's more, we had the same problem when we have tried to tackle the problem of the financing of energy efficiency in buildings. If you don't have the mortgage, if you don't have the security on the asset, then it's much more difficult, and it's much more like the consumer loan, in which case, in fact, the maturity you can offer is shorter. And you have to take into account also the revenues that could be generated by these assets, which is not the case, for example, for an energy efficiency investment directly. It's only a saving of some energy bills. But I think it's more on the model that has been developed in the US. So that's why we looked at it under the securitization angle. But it's more consumer loan, and in fact, there is a problem of duration that would be tricky.
That's all really interesting. Americo, we know that the ESG criteria are supposed to balance out some of these concerns, and they're essentially supposed to benefit projects and companies that are involved in sustainability businesses and endeavors. So how can the implementation of decentralized generation projects benefit companies actually when they're trying to contract credit? How does it help them to be involved in these particular types of projects which are climate-oriented, which are sustainability-oriented?
Well, today, ESG criteria and ESG ratings are common, are of common use in credit decision processes. Of course, we in BCP, we have already a ESG rating that is also an input for the credit rating. And obviously, if a company is running along that path, the transition and trying to become, trying to lower its emissions, level of emissions, obviously it is important. I don't know whether it is a decentralized consumption that is more important than a centralized consumption, provided it's renewable energy or green energy. At the end of the day, it's probably also a cost-benefit analysis that the company will do, and making that decision if it thinks it's better for the company in terms of what it wants to achieve and its own cost sheet. But and that, I think it's the way we look at that. We look at this not that much in terms of decentralized energy versus centralized energy, but if the company, if the client is making its transition, is as a framework that clearly defines the path from where it is to where it wants to be. It wants to be in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. On the other way, looking at, and I want to pick up something that you both said. in terms of the risk and the risk appraisal and the way we have to look at these projects from the point of view of financing decentralized energy. I think first we have this distinction whether it is a portfolio of B2B, business to business, or B2C. I would think that B2B portfolios, for starters, are easier to finance than B2C portfolios, and easier to finance at a lower scale, because I think probably at B2C portfolios we need a larger scale in terms to almost look at things in statistical terms, whereas in B2C, I think we can achieve a workable dimension in terms of portfolios at a lower scale, because obviously we will have the ability to look at the off-taker risk, to understand its credit standing and the way it can behave in a long-term contract. But obviously we have to have in place the right contractual structure, the right risk matrix, because when it comes to debt financing, I think are in some way pretty dull, because to lend money, we have to be reasonably convinced that we are going to be repaid and remunerated. So we have to have to be able to analyze predictable cash flows. We have to be able to understand the stability of the cash flows and the various risks that are able or that might impact these cash flows. And this is the same framework analysis than we use for other projects. So what we have to do, I think, is try to shape this business, try to make this market as financeable as any other one, and in fact to scale up the overall business to enable the generators and the various consumers to have this to participate in this expansion that everybody thinks, and I agree, it is something that is good because this brings the more resilience to the system, more efficiency, less lowering the investment costs. So it has a lot of advantages. And because it has a lot of advantages, we need to bring capital to facilitate growth, and to bring capital to facilitate growth. Clearly, we have to work on the risks that affect the cash flow and be able to have contractual structures that give us visibility over the long term, if we need long-term finance, over the long term of the behavior of the cash flows.
Well, we're just about out of time, but before we break for the lunch, I'd love to get from each of you your kind of quick #1 piece of advice that you would give to someone who is looking for financing for a decentralized generation project. Gilles, let's start with you. What would be your quick #1 piece of advice?
Oh, that's a tricky question. To start with me, it's not a very good presence. Huh?
We have a lot of tricky
because I would say
it's only one. Not a long list.
I think that we need, I mean, the problematic we've got is to have clarity on the risk we take. And there are lots of fuzzy areas that need to be analyzed and further worked on. And this, if you come with a convincing, I think we need somebody to wrap up in a certain way to start with, maybe, to have somebody to come with a package that is already analyzed, wrapped up, and maybe after a while we would get used to it. I think it's always like this, that you start to develop a market, you start by learning, and then you get used to it, and you manage to expand. I think we are in the learning period. So if you want, for the moment, we are on our side, we are extremely interested in participating to this expansion of the market, but we need to assess to understand a model that could work. And what we need for the moment is this model, to have something that works. And I think that in the short term, what could be done is, as I said, maybe to finance more a company that will do the work for us, or a local bank that will leverage on the relationship they've got with their clients.
That's good advice. Deepak?
So I think from where we stand, we would be more happy to entertain those conversations with developers, companies, enterprises that are trying to bring these projects together at an earlier stage, so that we could try to build that understanding ourselves, but also try to influence the potential structure to something that we think could work. To answer the question specifically, I would love to have a very clear understanding of the long-term cash flows and the sources of those cash flows. That would be probably the number one ask.
And Americo?
Well, I think I have to repeat my colleagues. I think it's the cash flow story has to be very clear, very transparent, very understandable. And my advice would be for the developers to get the right risk structure. The revenue risk, the PPA structure, the construction risk, all the risks properly and working together, because there are interface between the contracts that we have to have in a potential structure. So get the risks right and compelling cash flow story.
All very good pieces of advice, I think, and some really, really good insights from the financing perspective about what you guys are looking for and what risks you're watching out for. So how about a round of applause for our excellent panelists?
Thank you.
So now it's time to break for the lunch. The lunch will be in the same spot right outside these doors. This is a great time for networking, to make some connections, to make these projects happen, to get them off the ground. Then we're going to be back here in the room at 2:30 Lisbon time. For those of you watching online, that is, go ahead. That is 15:30 Central European time. We're going to be hearing about emerging market trends in decentralized energy. We're going to be hearing about the specific project that's here in this building. And we're going to be talking about how to get a cross-industry vision, a big overarching vision for how to get these projects off the ground. So that'll be back here in this room at 2:30. Until then, I invite you outside for the networking lunch. Enjoy.